Well, hello Divi Nation. Welcome to a brand new Divi use case live stream where each week we show you how you can add new design and functionality to your Divi websites. And today I'll be showing you how to easily create a Ken Burns hover effect on images, modules, and even entire rows using the Divi Builder. And to do this, I'll be taking advantage of the brand new transform options, which are now available in the Divi Builder. And this allows you to do things like scale and move around and even rotate elements on your page in creative ways. So don't forget to check out the video description for more information on this use case. And without wasting any time, let's go ahead and jump in and get started. All right, so I want to officially welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me today. Excited to get into this use case with you guys. Feel free to say hello, let us know where you're from, and ask any questions that you want to in the chat. I see Jazzy Bear Brown, hello from Iowa, welcome. Monique, hello, nice to see you, or, well, nice to read from you. And then let's see, we have Adnan, I think he's ready, so that's awesome. And all right, Roberto, hello from Chile. All right, and from Ireland, Kingsley, welcome. So a lot of people piling in. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in here. Looks like our streams are coming in pretty well. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, and the stream's coming in for you guys, just so I can make sure we're ready to go. All right. Hello, Mohammed from Egypt. Welcome. And Mira from Holland. Hello. Let's see. All right, everybody can hear me. That's awesome. That's a good first start. Let's jump in, guys. This is the, on my screen here, you can see that this is kind of the effect we're going for. This tutorial is about the Ken Burns hover effect. If you're not familiar with this effect, it was made popular by Ken Burns, who's American who made documentaries, and he incorporated this, zooming and panning effect of images in his movies. And the same thing has been applied throughout the web. It's an old effect. It's been around for a while. And it's usually something that happens like on a main header or something. The background image pans for a slight kind of effect that brings your images to life. This tutorial is about how to add that effect on hover. So it's a Ken Burns hover effect. And as you can see, if I hover over an image, this is doing a lot of things here. It is, number one, it's moving the image from, I believe, from right to left. So it kind of zooms in on the couple there. And then it also kind of has that slight rotation as well. And it also scales the image and makes it larger, which gives the zooming in effect. And so also involved here is the transition duration, the speed in which this happens. Right now it's kind of slow, just to kind of excuse me, emphasize the effect here for you, but you can speed it up. This is an example of a image in a one column row, and you can also do this same effect in multiple columns to any image here. Excuse me. This is a same effect. I just sped up the transition duration a bit. So that's how you can do it in multiple columns. So you can do it pretty much anywhere. This is actually an example of a text module, and we're using the effects here, the transform options, to actually move and scale the entire text module, which includes the text and the background image. So if I hover over it, you can see it's moving, scaling the entire module. And this is made possible by, basically this is in a row, so I'll show you that in a bit, but as long as you apply this like one little simple line of CSS to your column, whatever module, whatever column your module's in, just apply this overflow hidden property, and that allows you to scale the image within that column without it, expanding beyond and kind of breaking the design there. All right. So there you go. That's this is an example of combining the same effect with a filter hover effect. As you can see, it starts with a black and white, and then as it does the Ken Burns effect, it also does the transition to a color version. So there's so many options you can do. This is actually an example of using the transform options to, scale down the image and rotate it a bit, and then when you hover over it, it brings it back to the original state. So it's using a combination of a bunch of different effects there, which is just, I hope this is kind of, the idea here is to kind of give you some inspiration of some things that you can do with your images, modules, and even rows. So that's where we're going. And so we're going to jump in and get started, but I do want to welcome you if you are just joining us. This is our weekly Divi use case live stream where we show you how to add new design and functionality to your Divi websites. Today, I'm showing you how to add the Ken Burns hover effect to images and modules and rows using the Divi Builder. For more information, please check the video description for a link to the blog post that goes along with this use case. There it is. It went out today. If it's not out, it will be. And so this will help you to kind of explain things as well. So let's go ahead and get back to it. One thing I do want to mention, the blog post does have the ability to download the JSON layout, which will look like this, just to kind of give you a live version to test out for yourself. So let's go ahead and get started. To get started, basically you want to create a new page. So go to Pages, Add New, and then give your page a title, and then let's just deploy the Divi Builder on the front end. For this use case, I'm actually just going to build from scratch. Maybe if we have time in the end, I'm going to show you how easy it is to apply these elements to a pre-made layout. But for now, we're going to build it from scratch. So by default, I've got a regular section ready to go. I'm going to add a one column row, and then I'm going to add an image module. So once my image module settings are open here, I'm going to add an image. Now the trick here is to add an image that is large enough to kind of go beyond the container that it's in. So this one's about, 1600 by 900 pixels. The default container width or max width of a row in Divi is 1080 pixels. So that might give you an idea as to how large you want your image to be. Because much like the parallax effect and things like that, whenever you use the transform options here to scale the image, it's going to grow larger, so you don't want to lose any quality of the image when you do so. And also, the larger the image, the more room you have to play with and to move it around and things like that. So once you have your image installed, let's go ahead and I'm going to actually save it out. I'm going to come back there, but the first thing I want to do is, this is a kind of a key thing you need to do to make this work, is to go into your row settings, and then go to the Advanced tab and go to the Custom CSS. Now, you could add this code to the main element, but it really works out well when you add it to the column. So Only thing I'm going to add here is a CSS property, the overflow hidden property here. And like the property's name suggests, it hides the overflow of that container. So whenever we span the image out to be larger, it's not going to show beyond the column. So it's just going to hide it so that we can kind of keep everything contained in that column container. So once that's in there, I'm going to save it. And now I'm going to jump back to my image options, and I'm going to start adding my transform hover effects here. All right. So if you haven't had a chance to play around with these transform options, they're really, really amazing. And what I love about it is just the control that you have to pinpoint the location of things, to when you want to move it around or to skew it or rotate it. The UI is really easy to understand, and it's very intuitive. To get to those options, you just go to the design tab. And let me go ahead and get my box away from my video down there so you can see it. But I'll go to my transform options here. And here they are. The first tab is your scale, that makes things larger or smaller. The next one is your translate, which basically moves the item or the element around. The rotate allows you to rotate the element on the x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis here. And then the transform skew will skew the element in unique shapes and things like that. And then the transform origin, which if you wanted to pinpoint the location where things are rotated and things like that. All right, so we're going to primarily be using the scale, translate, and rotate option here to create this Ken Burns effect. And since we want this effect to only be applied on hover, we'll need to activate the hover options here and then click on the hover tab, and make sure that hover tab is selected whenever you're adding your transform options in here. All right, so we're about to add some options here, but I do want to quickly go over to the chat here to see if I have any questions. All right, so one question from Stefan, I believe, is, can you get this effect by loading the page? I'm sure it is possible. Don't know of the way currently, but it's not possible right now, like with a click of a button. But there might be a way you can add these effects with some custom code. I'm not aware of it though, but great question. I actually thought of that while I was building it. Would be cool to have that as well. Judy says we're in danger of a death by PowerPoint effect on our websites. Yes, obviously, you can get really carried away with these effects. And, as a general rule of thumb, you want to keep things subtle and simple for your visitors. It all depends on your website and what you're going for. But it's kind of like take it or leave it kind of thing. Use some of the options if you want. You don't have to use all of them and create a whole lot of movement on your page, but definitely want to use caution with these effects in real life. All right, so let's see if I have any questions over here on Facebook. Look like we're good here. Welcome everyone. Let's go ahead and start adding our first transform options to our image here, and we are in the image module settings. Applying it to the image, we've already added the overflow hidden to our column. So things are going to stay hidden once we scale the item. So let's go ahead and do that. I think you can use the simple drag feature here within the box to scale it however you want. And this is what's really cool about the feature, is that you can see in real time how it's going to look on hover. So let's say I wanted to scale it, I don't know, 130%. If I wanted to, let's see, I can unlock the two values here, so I can update those individually, the X and Y axis scaling as well. And I can also enter in my custom value by clicking on this one and entering it as well. So I'm just going to increase it to 130%, and go to my transform translate here. This is where we move things around. And I'm going to add a slight panning or moving of the image on hover. Remember, this actually works because I've scaled my image to beyond the column container. So now I have some ability to move my image around without it, breaking the design or showing up on the left. So just to show you what I mean, I'm going to unlock this and only update the y-axis here, the left to right motion. I'm going to give it 9%. Now, by default, it is a pixel value there. So I have to actually enter 9% manually. And the reason why I use percentage here is simply for responsive reasons, but you can also use pixel. You just might need to adjust it on different devices or browser widths. But as you can see, let's say I want to move it beyond like 9%. Let's go to, something like 20%. You can see the image is now kind of moving too far to the right, so it doesn't really work. I want to keep the image filling my entire column, so I don't want to move it too much. That's why I said the larger your image, the more control you have over this. So 9% is good, it's safe, it doesn't pan too far to the right. For my x-axis, I'm just going to give it a 3%. That just kind of lowers it a bit and kind of centers the image on the couple there on hover. And you can always toggle back and forth from the default state and hover state by clicking the tabs up here to see kind of a preview of what your hover effect's going to look like, which is very helpful. All right, and then you can also rotate it. For this example, I'm just going to add a simple rotation along the x-axis clockwise. So a positive degree would be clockwise, negative would be counterclockwise. I'm going to add 6 degrees here. And this just adds a slight rotation to the image. Again, want to be pretty subtle there. I don't want to start spinning the image around or anything like that, unless you like that kind of thing. Let's see. All right, so make sure it's all done in the hover tab. Once done, go ahead and save it. And actually, I'm gonna jump back in my image settings again, and I'm gonna go to my advanced tab. This is very important. Your advanced tab has the transitions options there, which allow you to control the transition duration, delay, and speed curve of your hover effects. So this allows me to speed it up or slow it down, basically how long you want the hover effect to take. If I wanted to, let's just make it, 2000 or something like that, 2000 milliseconds, which equates to 2 seconds. I hope my math is right there. And then you can also change the speed curve. I like a linear. That means it's not going to adjust the speed in any way during the duration of the hover effect. It's just going to stay kind of in a straight line. And then I'll save it out. And let's go ahead and preview it and check out what our effect looks like. Okay. All right, so when I hover, you can see there's my Ken Burns effect. It's very easy to do this in multiple columns as well because the same, process is involved. All you will need to do, and I'm just going to duplicate this section, and I'm going to actually change this row to just to give you an example, a 3-column row. And the 3 columns, if I wanted to, let's go ahead and duplicate my image here. Actually, I'm going to copy and paste it to each one of my columns. And if you notice, if I save it out, just so you can understand the importance of in fact, let me go out here and let me just delete. Well, I'm going to move it. Let me move this section under here so we can get a better view. Yeah, better view of these 3 columns up here at the top. All right, so right now, if you notice, it will work here in this column very nicely, automatically. But if I do it here, you can see that it's actually going beyond my column container because I haven't added my custom CSS snippet into my column. So since it was on the first column on my previous example, it kind of inherited it here, but I need to add it to these columns as well. And so I'm going to jump back in here to my my row settings, and then go to my custom CSS, and you see that little snippet overflow hidden that we added. We need to add it to each one of the column main elements. So column 2 main element gets the overflow hidden CSS, and column 3. Now when I save it out, you can see that the transform effects will not, or the scaling will not go beyond the column container. So it's nice and contained there. I hope that makes sense. All right. All right, so Paulo, the guy of that guy is not me. No, if that's what you're asking. No, that's not me. But all right. Jazzy Bear says, I think this is the easiest line of CSS I've ever seen. Yes, it's pretty straightforward. In fact, there's a bunch of simple custom CSS snippets that you can use that are very effective. All right, let's see. All right, so Mira had a good question. Is this also possible with a background picture in one of the columns? So if you're asking if we can add or isolate the effect only on a background image, currently not capable. You can't do that with these settings, the built-in settings, because by default, the transform options are going to be applied to the element. And so if you're adding it to, let's say, a module, for example, like an image module, if you add the effect to the image module, well, it's going to apply the scaling, the translate, the rotate to the entire module. So if you can imagine that module is wrapped in a div in the code base there, and then it's going to be applied to that outer div. So all of the elements, excuse me, behind it, like background image, things like that, will, are contained within that module. So you can't really isolate the child elements of the module with just the transform. What you're really asking, I guess, is do we have transform options just for the background image? And currently we do not. So, but that is a good question. Is there another trigger besides hover? Not currently. What specifically were you asking? Like on page load or something like that? It's a good question. Pablo asked that question. It looks like someone has, or Steven has it working on his website with no hover, I think. So hopefully, maybe he can weigh in and give us some tips there, but good questions. All right, let's get back to it. I have we've gone over how to add the transform effects to an image in multiple columns and a single column. Also, let's go ahead and see what it's like when we add it to a different module, like a text module. So to do that, I'm just going to add a new, let's go ahead and add a new section. And I'll give it a 1-column row, and then I'm going to add a text module. I'm going to save it out, and I'm going to just move it to the top here so we can see what we're working with here. And let me just give me some more space. Just move that. All right, move that out of the picture so everybody can see what we're doing here clearly. The text module has been added to a 1-column row. Let's go ahead and add some Ken Burns effects or transform options to our module. But first, we need some mock content. So let's go ahead and add some text there. I'm going to add a header here. So give it an H1 tag there using an example mock content from our wedding engagement pre-made layout pack. This is where these images are coming from, by the way. So there's my title, and let's go ahead and real quick add some fun designs here. Let's make it a Prada font. Let's increase my heading text to make it 6 VW. That is a viewport width length property, which is going to scale or is directly relevant or relative rather to the width of your viewport or browser. And this is a helpful length unit to use whenever you want a large header or something to scale with the browser. And then I'm going to add some column spacing. This is important because, in fact, I'm gonna go back to my content here. Before I add the column spacing, I'm going to show you why this is important. I'm going to go to add my background. So I'm going to add my background image to the module, the text module. Let's go ahead and add this one. And this image is 1920 by, I think, about 1100 pixels. A common size for like headers and things like that. And you can see why I need some spacing in my module now, because I want to use, in order to expose my background image of my text module here, I'm just going to add some padding. And I'll add, a 10 VW top padding and bottom. And let me scoot my settings over here to the right so you can see it better. And then I'll also add, I want to add some, you can see my text is hugging up to the left there too much. So I'm going to add some left padding. to bring it over. This also give me some room to work with whenever I start moving this module around on hover. All right. And I think we're ready to add some transform options now. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click on my transform options. Looks like I'm going to have to break it out again so you can see it. I'll just move it over here. That's probably a better idea. Okay, so now I'm going to, let's go ahead and increase the, first I want to activate my hover effects here and then click my hover tab. And I'm going to scale it up a bit. As you can see, it's not being hidden at the column level, so I'll need to add that. So I'm going to add, first I'm just going to increase the scale to, let's say 118% on hover. And let's do a transform translate and move this around. Let's just move it by, again, I'm going to use a percent length unit here, so 6%. And that's on the X and Y axis, but you can unlock that and customize it, move it however you like. You can also use pixels as well if you want to. The transform rotate, actually I'm just going to hold off on that, but you can add the rotate as well. And then I'm going to save it. And I got to go into my row here and then go to my custom CSS and add my overflow hidden, and I'm going to add it to my column. I always like to add it to the column because, like, you could add it to the row, but you would have to make sure the row doesn't have any padding or anything added to it, which would, you know, mess up the design. Save it out. And because it's added to a text module, it will add the transform options to the entire text and everything. And so there you go. And you can see my transition duration is the default, which is 300 milliseconds. So I can change that easily by going to my advanced tab, transitions, and then, you know, giving it maybe like a 5,000 if you want a really slow, dramatic effect. Something like that. You can also combine it with other effects, hover effects, like go back to my text module and then go to design tab and go to my filters. And let's say I wanted to add transform my image from black and white to color on hover. I would activate my hover options on the saturation filter effect. Make sure hover tab is selected, make sure my default tab is selected, and I'm going to bring it down all the way to 0%. And you can see my image is now, my entire module now is black and white. And then on hover, I can just set it back to 100%. And this hover effect will also inherit the transition duration that you've set. So all of this will kind of happen at the same speed. Save it out. And let's see what it looks like. There you go. Well, I didn't refresh. Hold on. There we go. So it starts black and white. I hover over it, and then it becomes color and also does the transform effects as well. And one last thing I wanted to show you before I answer some questions is you can, you know, if you wanted to, you can actually, you know, use the transform options to transform the default state of the module, and then on hover bring it back to its original state. And to do that, we're going to add a transform effect to the row. So here's how this works. I'm going to go to my row here. Now, I already have a transform options and filter hover effects on my module. So I'm going to add an additional one to my row. And as long as my module and my row stay the same size, in other words, my module continues to span the height and width of my row in the column, then I can kind of combine the hover effects. So if I go to my row settings, first thing I want to do is take out my custom padding on the top and bottom, the default padding that is, so that my text module hugs the row at the top and bottom. And you can actually, to make it kind of stand out a bit more, add a box shadow to your row. You can see how it, looks nice around the image or my text module. And then I can go over to my transform options on the row, go back up, go to my transform options, and now I can, this really only works from going from small to large. You don't want to add this effect from going from a larger version to a smaller version, because when you hover over it, it's just going to start jumping around, which isn't ideal. So I'm going to start off smaller, let's say something like, I don't know, 74% or something like that. And then I'm going to let's see. Yes. And so that's my default state, but I want to actually give a hover state as well. So my default state is 74% scale. And then my hover state, I'm going to set it back to 100%. So on hover, then it's just going to come back to my original size. And then I also want to add a rotation here. So I'm going to add a rotation on the y-axis here. I'm just going to give it a default. So my default state, I'm going to set it to 19 degrees. And then also for my z-axis here, I'm going to set it to 23 degrees. And so now you can see it's kind of rotated and kind of gives a little life to it. But then on hover, I just want to set those 2 degrees back to 0, back to the original state. And so now if I save that out, one more thing, go back to my row settings. You don't have to, but you probably want to match whatever transition duration you have for your text module, because you essentially are going to be hovering over the text module and the row module simultaneously. So if you wanted to, you can have a slower duration for your text module and then a quicker duration for your row. But I'm just going to add the same one. I believe it was 5,000, yeah. And so I'm going to save it out and then refresh. And so here's what it looks like. Now, by default, it's going to look like that. And then when I hover over it, it's going to come back to its original. And that's using, a combination of things, right? We added some, transform options and filter hover effects on the text module. And then we also added a transform option to our row on the default state and the hover state. So hopefully, I know that's a lot to take in, but hopefully it does give you some inspiration for what's available to you, some of the things that are some new design possibilities for you. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions here. When Matthew has a question, when can we get a basic image slider in Divi that displays full-size images in the slider instead of having to use background images? Good question. I do not know. But it definitely is a good suggestion. I think I understand what you mean by that, but yes. Steven says he's using WordPress Divi, but had to use CSS to make this work. Yes, I hope now with these new transform options, you won't have to resort to a bunch of custom CSS. But of course, this is essentially CSS, that code that's been added in the background as you update these options. So yes, it is a cool effect that's using pure CSS and not, JavaScript or anything like that. All right. Good. Good to see we have some people getting questions answered on the chat there. So Werner had a good question. Is there some link I can go to see all CSS commands that I can use with a description on what it does? So I guess you're asking on all the CSS commands that are available for the transform property. A quick Google search on transform CSS will give you some idea of what the transform property has, but essentially the basic ones are the ones included in your Divi Builder transform options, which include let's go back in here, which include the scale, translate, rotate, skew, and transform origin. And so those are the main elements that the CSS property, transform property uses. This just allows you to customize it without having to know or meticulously type in those values and test them out on the code level. Good question. Al, I think, has a question. Can I rotate writing? Yes, you can rotate text, which is essentially what I was doing here. If you rotate a text module on hover, or it doesn't have to be on hover, you can just rotate text. In fact, I think that's a great idea for a tutorial that I'll be doing in the future, just on how to rotate text using the transform option, and just use it in your design in creative ways. So the answer to your question is a resounding yes, you can. All right, is it possible as full width? I'm not sure what you mean, but I think, yes, this is possible with full width. Let me go ahead and save this out. This, just to kind of give you an idea of how to do this, I don't think we have time to go into it very much, but let's say if I wanted to, I'm going to add a pre-made layout. Just going to use this home page here. If working with a pre-made layout with some designs already in place, you can actually use this in a lot of ways. So here's my pre-made layout of the wedding engagement layout pack. And notice that this header section up here has a section that has a custom width, right? It's not panning the full width. So if you wanted to, you can actually, create this transform or this Ken Burns effect to this entire row. The main thing you'd have to do is go to your section settings and add that custom CSS overflow hidden to the section itself, and then add your transform properties to the row. And then, for example, let's make it hover enabled there, and then I'm just going to scale it up, and then let's just move it over a bit on hover. It's really amazing how much control you have over this. And then Let's just save it out. And then if I preview it, now if I hover over this row here, you can see that the whole thing transforms, and it's hidden. The overflow is hidden at the section. So, I mean, it's kind of like a not very, I guess, practical in this case, but I just wanted to show you what was available if you wanted to. Let's say you wanted to add, I don't know, let's go ahead and pull in our gallery page here, which has a lot of images on it. I'm going to go ahead and delete some of this stuff that we don't need. And you can see here, it might make more sense to do that same effect to the row, right? If you wanted to add that hover Ken Burns effect for this header, if you wanted to add the same type of effects to any of these images here, as you can see, they are all in a column. So you would just go in here and add your filter effect, your overflow hidden CSS to the column, right? Overflow hidden, and then go to your image, go to your transform, go to hover, and you can scale it up and then move it over. Save it. And there you go. See how easy that was? Let's just, it might be helpful here. Let's say I'm just going to highlight my image in the code area here, just so you can see. So if I can't really, let's activate my hover state here. You can see that this is the image module on hover. You can see how far it's kind of scaling past the column there, but it's remaining hidden. So hopefully that's a good visual for you to what that's doing there. All right, I'm pretty much done here. Hopefully that was enough for you guys. I hope I've answered most of your questions. How do you, going back to our questions here, how do you apply this effect to all buttons of a website? If you are referring to like globally across the whole website, that would probably need to be done with external CSS, and then use a custom CSS ID to target those buttons. But you can also do them individually using these transform options. You might, one idea would be making one button global or something like that, a global item, and then use it throughout your site, and then just update one to kind of update all those transform effects at once. But good question. Can you rotate an icon image or icon, not an image? Yes. Really, you can add this to any module. So any module's fair game. Blurb modules, anything. Some modules just really won't make sense to start rotating, obviously. But yes, any module, like a blurb module with an icon, that will get the transform options applied to those as well. Can an image hover in another image, basically to different images? Not sure what you mean by that, Werner, but maybe you can clarify. All right. All right, that's all I got, everyone. Um, Again, don't forget to check out the blog post that goes along with this for any code snippets, that CSS snippet, or any more information, or to download the JSON that goes along with it. All right, that's all I got for you this week, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Please be sure to subscribe to our blog newsletter, our YouTube channel, and like us on Facebook. That way you don't miss out on any future updates, any future live streams, or freebies we'll be sending your way. And we'll be back here next Tuesday with another Divi use case live stream. But our next live stream is actually this Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern with the weekly WP Roundup. So be sure and check that out. And if you want to share your own knowledge, skills, and expertise on the Elegant Themes blog, there's a link in the video description to check out more information on how you can share your own unique content with the Divi community. Thanks again. See you guys soon.